Welcome to Cultural Connections Lab. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly Forbes. We are here to talk with educational professionals around the world to impact and influence the education system as we focus on cultural connections and the education of multilingual, diverse students. We're excited to have you join us today, and we sincerely hope that you enjoy the show.
Hey there, listeners. Are you ready to take your school district to new heights? Introducing EduSkills, the leading software as a service platform for Title III and multilingual support in education. Having been a director of English language development for a school district, I was honored and privileged to get to use EduSkills. EduSkills understands the importance of equitable education and empowering multilingual learners to thrive in today's classrooms. Their cutting-edge technology provides school districts across the nation with the tools they need to enhance language acquisition, foster inclusivity, and improve academic outcomes. With their seamless implementation and comprehensive support, I have witnessed EduSkills ensure a smooth transition for school districts, empowering their educators to provide targeted instruction and personalized support. So why wait? Unlock the potential of your school district today with EduSkills. Visit their website, eduskillsllc.com, or call them at 405-879-9898 to schedule a demo. EduSkills, transforming education one student at a time. Welcome to another podcast episode with myself, Dr. Kelly Forbes. We are so excited to have you here with us for an episode of Cultural Connections Lab with two amazing educators, researchers, people who are in this field of dual language education, multilingual education. We have fantastic guests today, and they are the authors of Dual Language Tandem Teaching. We have today Dr. Elizabeth Howard as well as Shera Simpson. And I am excited to have them with us today. We are going to be learning so much from them. But a little bit about them. They have their new book that I just mentioned. And every single chapter starts with a little story. So I'm going to introduce them with a story that they have. When we were working together as tandem teachers, we were in different places in our knowledge and understanding of dual language educational practices with different strengths and challenges. As an established researcher and lead author of the GP3 and other resources for dual language education teachers, and with many years of experience preparing pre-service and in-service teachers to work effectively with multilingual learners, Liz was well-versed in best practices in dual language instruction. However, she had never worked as a dual language education teacher and had never had the opportunity to implement those strategies in that context. As we all know, understanding something and being able to do it are two different things. Shera, on the other hand, was new to dual language education and was much less familiar with these instructional strategies. She had heard of a few of them, but that was about it. Luckily, as a kindergarten teacher, some of her background in early childhood education coincided with best practices in dual language education: movement, visuals, concrete activities, repetition. She was using some of the strategies intuitively and had acquired further knowledge through her own practitioner research to discover what the students needed and what worked well and what didn't. They planned together twice a week and also had a lot of exposure to one another's teaching because they shared the same classroom, so they were able to talk about best practices and try them out together to see how the students responded. With so many instructional frameworks for multilingual learners and their busy schedule for planning and delivering instruction, they focused on the things that mattered most for helping their students, namely strategies for helping them understand and engage with the content regardless of language of instruction, approaches for fostering language and literacy abilities in both languages, and ways to make connections across languages and enable students to use all of their languages to be resources to foster their learning. Over time, they worked to build consistency with how these strategies were being used in both classrooms, and they saw the beneficial results in their students with growing comprehension, language proficiency, cross-linguistic awareness, and confidence. Since then, Shera had participated in many professional development activities, including book studies, professional institutes, and attending and presenting at conferences. She's also remained in the classroom and actually founded her own dual language education school, which is named Outside the Box, located in Brasilita, Costa Rica. And she also continued her professional inquiry, and her knowledge of best practices in dual language education instruction has expanded considerably. Liz has taken her experience in the classroom back to her university, teaching and dual language education research, both of which have been greatly enhanced by the experience that they have had. And of course, they've been working together ever since on developing the ideas that you're going to read in this book whenever you purchase it. So a big welcome, gracias por todo, and thank you to Shera Simpson and Liz Howard for being here today.
Oh,
how are
thank
y'all
you so much,
doing?
Kelly?
Yeah.
We're great.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're really excited. Today's our first launch into podcast. We've never done this before, so we're really excited and a little nervous too.
That's what. Yeah. Well, that's what I heard. I heard that you had one earlier, that you had never been on any podcast before. You had one earlier today, and now you have one
That's
right
right.
now.
A double header.
You're jumping in. You're doing immersion on your own.
That's right.
Just
Yeah,
jumping
podcast
right in.
immersion. Yeah.
Podcast immersion.
Wait, listeners, I'm a little background. I was just explaining to them that I'm so fortunate and blessed to have just a little over a year ago, this last May, have completed my my dissertation and my doctorate. And I have both of these amazing authors and researchers embedded as well into my research. So it's really exciting to be able to be on this side of it and to sit back and to have this masterclass with both of you. And so we're really, really thrilled to have you here today. And like I said, I was just, fanning early. I was so excited because I thought these two amazing stars in the field of dual language education are actually going to be here. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for having us.
So just to start off a little bit, before we dive into this chapter 2 and have this conversation centered around dual language education and some of the great research that we discuss, or that you all discuss here in chapter 2, I can't wait to dive into that. But would you all mind sharing just a little bit about who are you all before we necessarily got into here? What was your path to even, I know that my path was just a very unique path to get into the field of education in general. So what is your path of getting to where you are right now?
Who you want me to start, Liz?
Yeah, sure.
I can start and share my path. It's a little bit unorthodox, but I think in general, I was born to be a teacher. That's just in my blood and who I am from very early on. I think I was teaching line dance lessons when I was 10 years old, and I've never stopped teaching ever since. In some shape or fashion, I've been teaching. And it's I come from a long line of teachers. My mom's a teacher. My grandmothers both are teachers. Aunts and uncles, cousins, and friends, all in education. So that was just destined to happen. But when I went to college, of course, I was pretty stubborn. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to walk a totally different line. And I wanted to be a doctor. Things change and happen. And halfway through my college career, I changed and decided, yes, indeed, I needed to be a teacher. So I did get a degree in early childhood education. And I started teaching right away out of college, but then abruptly stopped and became a totally different thing. I was in property management and helping with our family business. And kind of closed the chapter on teaching. So I thought, until we moved to Costa Rica 8 years later. And I wanted to meet some people. So I started subbing at a school in Costa Rica and then fell in love with the dual language program and taught there for 8 years, which is where I met Liz. And then, as you mentioned, I started my own program. So I kind of left, got back in. And when I did jump in, I jumped in full steam ahead in dual language and just thought that it was just such an amazing form of teaching. And I think, my love of learning and my love of teaching and my love of learning Spanish all kind of put together this beautiful package. And I met Liz at a school where I was teaching kindergarten. And she came for a sabbatical. So I'll let her hop in and kind of share where we meet there, but she can tell you about her journey.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, we definitely have some things in common. I did never work in property management, but I also come from a long line of teachers. My mom was a teacher, and my grandfather was superintendent of schools in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And there's, in fact, Goins Elementary School named after him. So we're proud descendants of Jesse Goins, superintendent of Cheyenne many years ago. So I had a long line of educators. And like Shera, I also was determined to not be a teacher. And, definitely did not major in education in college. I majored in Spanish. I always loved languages. And and saw that in my future and traveling. And in fact, I went to the Peace Corps right after graduation. The day after graduation, I got my Peace Corps notification letter, and 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to Costa Rica. So that was my original connection to Costa Rica. I was in the Peace Corps there right after college and lived there for 2.5 years and absolutely fell in love with the country and stayed in touch with. I lived in a lovely small town, dairy farming community, and absolutely fell in love with the people there, and they became lifelong friends that I stayed in touch with, to this day. So when I had a sabbatical, but so during that time, I taught. That was my job. I was in adult education, not because I knew anything about education, but because I spoke Spanish reasonably well, and that was a program that required people who had a high level of Spanish proficiency because you had to work with Ministry of Education officials, and they wanted people who had more proficiency. So they trained us in the background, and the pedagogy was very Paulo Freire, very in the forefront of the education that we got, and Costa Rica had a very established program for promoting adult education, basically like a GED kind of a program. There are a lot of people, especially in rural communities, and especially the women, who hadn't had the chance to go to school, and especially secondary education, because they were working in the farms, or it was too far from school, or the women just simply weren't allowed to go during that time. So this was a real benefit to the communities, and Costa Rica had a wonderful, and they still do, I think, a very well established program, and so I just kind of fit into that system where I taught English. I was the English counterpart teacher in my community, and I also traveled around to a lot of communities. I had a motorcycle and traveled around to 3 different school districts, which it's hard for a lot of people to believe, especially my children, I think, that I ever rode a motorcycle, but I did, and traveled around to lots of communities, met lots of lovely people and teachers, and worked with them on developing these adult ed programs. So I really fell in love with it. I didn't think I would be a teacher, but kind of like Shera, it was always in my blood, and as soon as I started doing it, I just loved it, and realized, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But so when I got back to the States, I didn't have a teaching certification. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to pursue it. I started looking into programs and found out about bilingual teaching in California. And my best friend from the Peace Corps happened to be from California, and so we decided to become roommates and both get teaching jobs, and so that embarked my career in transitional bilingual education. At the time, there weren't dual language programs in the district where I was working. They were very, very new. This was in the very early 90s. And so I started in transitional bilingual programs, and then pursued a teaching certification while I was doing that. And while I was teaching, especially in the second school where I taught, I had a population of many students who came from Spanish-speaking families and were Spanish dominant. But I also had about a third of my class who were English dominant and really English monolingual. And I was the third grade teacher in that situation. And I thought that these kids had been in a bilingual program. I hadn't ever heard the term dual language, but I had the impression that the kids who were from English dominant homes had still been in these bilingual classes, and that they would all be bilingual. So the first day of school, the kids were sitting in front of me on the carpet, and I started speaking Spanish. And I saw, like a third of the class starting to elbow each other and like look at each other, saying, like they were mouthing to each other, like, what is she saying? What's she saying? And I stopped and I said, raise your hand if this is your first time in a bilingual classroom. And all those English dominant kids raised their hands. And I was like, oh, okay. This is not what I thought I was coming into. And so, it just definitely changed. Teachers, we always think on our feet, right? And so just kind of quickly thinking on my feet and changing how I taught. But it definitely, opened my eyes to like, this would be great if these kids were in the program from the very beginning, and other teachers in the school were having the same idea. And the school actually had us go on a field trip to a very well-established dual language program in Sonoma County called Cali Calmecac, which was amazing. It totally blew me away to just see this program. Was a 90-10 program, and it was just so well run, and to see all the kids, working in both languages and from different language backgrounds, different racial ethnic backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, seeing them all come together and learning in 2 languages, I just thought, this is it. This is what I love. This is beautiful. And, really, it just sold me. So I ended up moving away from California at that time. I was sort of at a transitional point, and I thought, apply to a doctoral program. And if I get in, I guess I'll go. And if I don't, then I would apply to that school. That's what I was thinking was my other option. And I got in and got some financial aid, some scholarship too. And, so I ended up moving back east to go graduate school. So, but I stayed in dual language. I started doing some research with dual language. And ever since that time, I've just been very invested in the dual language world.
That is an incredible pathway for both of you. And so some fun facts. I wasn't going to be an educator either.
Isn't that funny?
I was going to be a dancing bilingual veterinarian. That was my goal.
I love that. Yeah.
Yes. That was going to be like, that was the whole thing. And I was working on a Royal Caribbean cruise line as a singer and a dancer. Wow. And then I got off and I had a little, like 6 months in between. And I got a permanent job as a substitute teacher, for a Spanish teacher. And then it went back on the cruise ship, finished that contract, came back, and that's whenever I became a newcomer teacher. And they were advertising for a bilingual teacher, and it was the same way. I don't have my degree in education; it was in Spanish. Since then, I've received the master's and doctorate through education. But so I started as a newcomer teacher, and there were 7 countries and 8 languages represented in the classroom. Wow. And that's whenever I started wanting to know more about. You should be able to do more with just English. Like, what about their language? So I had all these thoughts, but I didn't know why I was having these thoughts or any of the research behind it. And so luckily that was kind of my pathway to get to where I am today. But 3 of us right here, not going to be in education. Now we're in education. And the other fun fact is that when I was the principal of a one-way immersion school, we had students that would go to Heredia for 4 months or for 4 weeks.
Cool.
And then they would come to our school, and then another group would go to Spain, Madrid, Spain for 8 weeks.
Wow.
And their students would come. So they applied in 4th grade and would go in 5th grade. So I was able to go and visit them in Costa Rica in Heredia. But I also, whenever I was majoring in Spanish, lived in Costa Rica for a while. That's why I was like, pura vida. Wow. They always called me Quelito.
What a connection.
So that's why it's Quelito. Yeah.
Quelito. And where did you live?
In Barrio Córdoba in San Jose.
Oh, nice.
Actually,
okay, cool.
Yes. Yeah. I loved it so much over there. I was
cool.
teaching and dancing. So I called my grandparents and I said, hey, I think I'm going to let my plane go tomorrow and not get on. And they said, okay. And I just stayed.
Wow.
It was so fantastic.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's
it was really great. Well, I love these connections that we have. There's been some other educators as well that weren't necessarily going to get into education, but I think whenever it's in your blood and part of who you are, you can't help but just be attracted to it, and it draws you in, definitely. And so I'm thankful that you all answered the call for sure. So as we jump into this, I really want to just tell everyone again, listeners, if you have not already seen or heard about dual language tandem teaching from Velasquez Press, we will have the link in the bio as well as other ways to get in contact with our amazing guest today. But I would really recommend getting this because, of course, it's focused on dual language education, but you can really consider what dual language education practices look like overall in any classrooms, because we have many, many classrooms, many schools, many districts that regardless of the name that they have, they're still bilingual, multilingual schools. I've been doing some work, fortunately, in one school, and 51% of the students are bilingual, and I think 49% are identified as a EL student, a multilingual English learner student. But regardless, that's half of the population of that building is bilingual. So the school, therefore, in my opinion, this is a bilingual school. This is a multilingual school. And so you may not have that program in place, but you have practices. And so going over and reading through the chapter 2, I loved the topic because I get questions like this all the time. There are so many amazing frameworks. There are so many different quote unquote programs that people might call them. But things like teaching learning cycle, translanguaging unit planning, literacy squared, SIOP, TWIOP, C6, biliteracy unit framework, counterbalanced instruction. I won't lie, I feel pretty versed in this field, and there were some things I was learning, which is great because I always want to keep learning. But it's so true, and I know that educators sometimes, especially when they don't have the background in multilingual education, language learning versus language acquisition, language, or as in the book as well was being discussed. We are not just learning about language, but we're learning through language, right? And then we are also learning language and learning about language. And you do some great conversation throughout this that just really kind of clarifies what those main roots are. I want to give you guys a chance, if you could explain. We have some veteran teachers for sure that I know are listening, and I know we have some brand new teachers that are thinking, what am I supposed to do right now? What is your advice for them whenever they do have so many frameworks coming at them? What does that teacher need to know, or that principal need to know?
Right. Well, that was, sort of where we started, and like kind of going back to that original story about the two of us. That I had a background. I've been a professor at the University of Connecticut for many years, and I've trained a lot of cohorts of bilingual teachers and ESL teachers and classroom teachers who work with multilingual learners. And so I've used a lot of these different frameworks in my classes, and I was familiar with them. And so it was really fun coming into the classroom with Shera and having the chance to work with them and really, use them as a teacher but then pull from them, because I did have a background in many of them. I was able to kind of pull from them. And Shera was new to them because, she was saying she was new to dual language. That was really her second year of working in dual language. She didn't have a background in it before. So it was helpful to kind of think about these, what we ended up calling the common roots, as a way both for me to synthesize, since I was kind of working from multiple ones that I had familiarity with. So on my end, I was kind of synthesizing across them. And on Shera's end, it was introducing kind of the key ideas from them and kind of helping her see just like the main points and not getting caught up in the weeds of, this is associated with the PSYOP or this is associated with GLAD, but kind of trying to focus on the big ideas. So that's really, where the idea came from. And since then, we found it helpful working with the teachers in the schools that we've worked with and in our book, to think about it that same way. That's why we came up with that metaphor. We said, there's this beautiful garden of all these different instructional frameworks. And they are all beautiful. I mean, I love them all. They're all great. We've, worked, we use them a lot. I use them a lot in my teaching at the university, and we use them in the classroom. They think very highly of all of them, but it can be overwhelming, for a new teacher to be like, I don't know which one to pick, or an administrator who might know. Oftentimes our administrators don't have backgrounds in bilingual education and maybe aren't as familiar with these frameworks, and they might go to a conference and hear about one and think, okay, we should all switch. We should stop doing this one and start doing this one because this is the one everyone's doing now. This is the new exciting one. Or or there might be tensions. We've talked to some principals who have said there are really strong disagreements and tensions in their school because some people feel very strongly about one framework. Some people feel very strongly about another one, and they're sort of at odds with one another about which one is the, so-called right one to use. So, we use this metaphor as a way to say, let's just really think about what's under the surface. Let's look below all of these frameworks to what are their common roots and think about it that way. And that way, we can sort of agree that regardless of which framework we're using, or if we're borrowing from multiple frameworks like I was doing, that at the end of the day, we're really always focusing on these common roots that they all have in common. And that's how we can have consensus about it. And we cannot get so worried about using the right one or the best one, that we're, at the end of the day, they're really all trying to accomplish the same thing. And if we kind of keep our eyes on that, it can help us to focus and to have conversations with one another and with people who are not in dual language. We call these the common roots of soil of effective instruction for multilingual learners across programs. So we also think it's a great way to have conversations and to have a common language across all of the program models in a district. Most districts don't only have dual language programs. They usually have other programs, either because they have other multilingual learners who don't speak the language of the dual language program, and so they're not a good fit, or they have more dual language multilingual learners than their dual language programs can register and can enroll. And so often it's the case. You see multiple different program models in a district. So our thinking is that this is a way also to have that common language. And even if, for example, the dual language program is using literacy squared or teaching for biliteracy because they think that works better in their context, and the English monolingual sheltered programs are using the PSYOP, we can still say, okay, well, we're going to use these different frameworks, but let's look at how we have these common roots, and we're really all doing these same things across our program models.
I think that is it's really nice, and reading it, it's just very easy to understand. So even if you're not well versed in this field, particularly of multilingual, bilingual, dual language education, you can read through this and really understand, hey, there are these practices. And again, just to let all the listeners know, the 5 roots are content language integration, comprehensible input, comprehensible output, background knowledge, and metalinguistic and cross-linguistic awareness. Those are things that students need all the time, even if it's just English only. Even if it's today and they're learning about Shakespeare, they still need some cross-linguistic connections between Shakespearean English and what that looks like and what that meant versus what that is today to make those connections. So these are practices that are going to be great for everyone, but in my opinion, it's oxygen for our multilingual learners. These are things that we have to have to be able to survive and to make these connections so we can acquire language, learn language, and acquire content and speak on that level that we're required and needed to speak in the education system for, of course, the fun thing of assessments and things like that. But really on this side of it's because this is like a moral imperative to be able to really stop and reflect upon our pedagogical practices and how do we make them culturally sustaining in such a way that really helps all of the students, not the ones that were, departmentalized into Title III or had to go to that ELD classroom. But I always love this, and I think that you all might have something similar in this story, but I wasn't supposed to be bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate. I grew up in an English-only speaking home. No one else in my family speaks Spanish. It was Senora Atkins at 15 years old at Metro, where I went to school, who got me into language, who, inspired me to want to major in Spanish, that allowed me to meet my salsa partner from Cali, Colombia, and Chicos Calito, eres adoptado aquí in Colombia, and to learn salsa caleña and the cumbia and what that dance even means and the slavery connection behind it. I mean, my whole world, the point is, has been opened up only because of language.
Right.
And that has therefore connected to so much with culture. So it's just a great, the classroom is a great place to create that ecosystem where we can share our culture, share our languages, and having these roots be at the forefront of our mind is going to help all the students learn and then also share more about each other.
Yeah, and for us, it was really helpful to say, if we just focus on these things, another big component is that we all have scripted curriculum. We're given curriculum that we have to use, and we're our hands are tied in that sense. But if we just focus on the roots, so we tried to create something that could say, just check these boxes, even if you're handed this curriculum, and even if you're told this is what you have to do. Make sure you're meeting the common roots and soil, because we think that that's going to take it up a step, right? They might give you what you have to do, but if you can implement these as well, then you're really going to be able to support all your learners.
Right? Yeah. No, it's needed again overall. I mean, the majority of our classrooms, and I'm currently right now in Oklahoma, and people don't always expect Oklahoma to be as multicultural and diverse as it is. And so I think it's just exciting to consider what this looks like, in all of our classrooms, even if the majority of the students in there are monolingual English-only speakers. It's that exposure that I think is also just so important and helps us in our very multicultural, diverse, society, world, and community.
Right.
Yeah,
overall.
Sure.
And, going back and building on that, going back to what you were saying about the importance of culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogy, that is, we just wanted to, mention that that's the soil that we talk about when we talk about the common roots and soil below the surface. So we have those 5 common roots that you mentioned that really cut across all those different frameworks that are in that garden. But we say that they all need to be planted in that soil of culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogy in order to take root and really flourish and help the kids develop and grow and achieve in all the ways that we want them to. So, having that affirming stance and doing, we're real advocates for place-based learning, project-based learning, doing a lot of activities in the community. You see that in the book. You see a lot of examples of the kids and us going out into the community, doing activities in the community and bringing community members into the classroom as well. And so, that's...
So it doesn't take till you're 15 with Senora Gomez. It doesn't. You don't have to wait till you're 15 to get those connections.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It needs to be at a younger age for sure.
Right. But really making it opening up the walls, like Shera's school's name, outside the box, like really getting outside the 4 walls of the school, whatever many walls are in there, but the 4 walls of the classroom, and really, experiencing the community, taking our learning out into the community, and inviting a lot of different community members with a lot of different expertise into the classroom to really show how much that's valued and cultivated. And so it's not just a narrow, even if we are using that scripted curriculum, that we really can enrich it in a lot of ways by bringing in community members and going out into the community and thinking about how we can expand it.
Yeah, for sure. And it is difficult whenever teachers are given the script. And I've been in schools before where they had the script and they always ask me those questions. Well, how do I do this whenever I already have this to do? And so we really sit down and evaluate ways in which they could do it. But we always start with students first. Who's represented in your classroom? Who's there? What assets are they already bringing? What family members can come in and read part of the script? I mean,
Exactly.
what can you do to bring that in? But I love how you were just talking about also going out into the community and being a part of it. And if we're not out in the community and being a part of it, well, then we're very easily a problem in it. So we need to be very active and engaged in the communities where we live and also where we're serving. But I love also in the book talking about that, it was under the background knowledge. And I think this was at this school in Costa Rica, outside of the box, which is so funny because I always say, if there's a box, get me out of it. I want to be outside the box all the time if possible. So whenever I read the name, I was like, this is the perfect name for a school outside the box. But I loved learning about the field trip that you took to help build background knowledge. Can you expand a little bit upon that? And why is that experience so important? Because it's much more than what we do typically in the classroom. And it doesn't have to necessarily, not everyone has access maybe to some of these opportunities, but there are virtual possibilities. There are ways to actually get out into the community, but to really go on a trip, to leave the classroom, to touch the chicken that I saw in the picture, be ever part of it, and to build that background knowledge through common experiences and common scenarios and situations, I think was fantastic. And I would love to hear more about what that was like and what you all learned from that. And have continued to learn from that experience, as well as with the kids.
Yeah, well, that wasn't an original thought. That comes from Teach Your Biliteracy. They always say, take the field trip first. And we take that to heart. First. Yeah. And instead of, culminating with this, beautiful experience after learning, just start there. Start with the experience and build that background knowledge. And so we do that often. Actually, we're really fortunate and take lots of field trips at my school, but we live in a community where we have access to a lot of great things. I live by the beach. We're super into nature. And so we get out there in the community all the time, to the grocery store, to the across the street, to the beach or to the park. But we consider those key pieces in starting a unit, because that's where kids have that firsthand experience. We take tons of pictures. We make sure that they are used later on when we're introducing new vocabulary. Remember when we were over, at the beach the other day and we were looking, digging into the sand like that? This is what this is, just using those experiences to help our kids. And I think, when Liz and I had the experience together, we were going across the street to a farm. Once a week, we had the dedicated space for it, but we didn't always go to the farm. Sometimes the kids would go to the farm with Liz. Sometimes they would go with me. And sometimes we stayed in the classroom and conducted research or drew pictures or read stories. But for us, it's just, you build background knowledge, but you also have opportunities for comprehensible input and comprehensible output, metalinguistic and cross. All those other roots also come into play when you are having those experiences, because it's just so much easier to access all of those components when you have hands-on real life experiences. So for us, it's just a given that you are out into the community. You're exposed to more people, more different ways of speaking and how to engage. So for us, it's just a key component of how we teach.
And we will be right back. Are you ready to take your K-12 multilingual programs to new heights? Look no further than the experts at Kelly B's Consulting. We're not just consultants, we're partners in education, with a passion for empowering students and enriching your classrooms. At Kelly B's Consulting, we understand the unique cultural and linguistic needs of your diverse student population. Our team of experienced educators will work alongside you, tailoring strategies that transform your multilingual programs. Don't miss out on this opportunity. Visit www.kellybsconsultingllc.com today to learn more and schedule your consultation. Kelly B's Consulting, shaping the future of K-12 multilingual education across the nation. Your success is our commitment. Contact us now and let's start building a brighter tomorrow together. And now, back to the show.
I remember one time I was fortunate to teach in a classroom that had windows. Not every classroom has windows, but I was so fortunate to be in a classroom in the basement that still had windows, so it was nice. with the newcomer classroom, and it was 6th through 8th grade. And I remember teaching a math lesson, and Liliana looked outside and it started snowing. And so we just stopped the lesson right there, because I knew that many of the students in that classroom had never, they don't come from a part of the world that ever has snow. So we ran
Such a big deal.
outside. It was such a big deal. But I remember Liliana running outside and just like, slipping off the stair and falling immediately. And I thought, uh-oh. And then she just started laughing and got up, and it was no big deal. And we all laughed. And we were very much a family in our classroom, because it was just us. Like we were, it was just us, really. But it's in those moments right there where math needed to stop for a minute. We could get back to math anytime, but this was such a big learning moment. But it's the fact that like, it wasn't just seeing the snow or a video of the snow or it being cold in the room and you act like it was snowing. I mean, you got to touch the snow, taste the snow, feel the snow, fall on the snow, be wet, get that, that stain on your jeans that you had. I mean, it was that whole experience, but that right there was a bigger learning moment than anything I was doing the moment before.
For sure. And, the other thing that a lot of, listeners may feel like that's not, they don't relate because they're not across the street from the beach in Brasilito, Costa Rica. But, that's
but I
okay.
I want to be. Eso sí quiero.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, some field trips can just be walking around the building. We did that when we were studying angles and lines and shapes and things like that. So you can literally make your field trip to the cafeteria. But when you call it a field trip and you say, we're going to go do this and we're going to see this, and you walk outside that classroom, even if it's just to the cafeteria or around the building, those experiences can be valuable too. So I don't want anybody to think like, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the beach across the street. You can make it a field trip and have those experiences and capitalize on the exposure of the field trip first, even if it's, just right outside the four walls.
Right.
Yeah. I always encourage educators, do whatever you would want to do to make it fun. Even whenever I was a principal, for example, I would try to do anything to make what we had to do fun, just because sometimes you just have to go through things. You just have to sit through it and just do it.
Yep.
But why can't we make it as most fun as possible, the most exciting, whatever that looks like? And so we would typically do a lot of things, quote unquote, outside the box. And we got the same end result at the end, but we had such a good time doing it. And if teachers, definitely. I mean, we have a lot where you can just, like you said, go outside of our buildings. But then at the same time, though, there are community partners, there are local areas, wherever you are, that would most likely be incredibly willing and accepting to having a teacher and their students be able to come and participate in something. But even like I love like going outside and doing geometry with real life objects right there.
Sure.
That's so much more fun than the worksheet.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And that's exactly right about the community partners being so willing. I mean, I also taught in the first grade classroom at the school, which outside the box is Shera's school now. And we taught at a different school when we met. But at that school, I also taught first grade. And for that unit, for social studies, we were doing a unit on community businesses. We were doing entrepreneurs unit that the kids chose at the end of the school year. The kids all got to choose. We did a lot of thematic units, and the last one the kids got to choose. So this class was very entrepreneurial, and they chose to do a unit on entrepreneurship. So we were visiting a lot of local businesses, but so it was very easy. Like we just walked outside the door of the school and we just literally walked. Every couple of days we'd go walk to a different business, and the business owners were very happy to invite us in. And we had a little graphic organizer that we had created together that asked, so we would have like some interview questions and be able to ask them and compare and contrast across answers. But it wasn't like we had to hire a bus and raise money, and it was free. We just walked out the door and we just went to the businesses that were in right near the school. I mean, that's how we selected them. We weren't sampling all the different kind of businesses. We just were like, okay, where can we walk? Where can we just have this last for 45 minutes or an hour? Because we don't want it to be a full day field trip that's going to interfere with all the other classes. We just want to make this very bounded. And so it's definitely very possible to do that. And likewise in the kindergarten classroom, we did a unit on community helpers, and Shera's continued to do that in her new school. And it's great. They're so welcome. We had the police come and visit, firefighters, and Shera's had, medical workers come. And sometimes we would go and visit them in their place of work, but a lot of times they would come to us, and the kids just love it. And they love it. It's a great opportunity to have them come into the classroom and to talk about what they do and to create those community connections.
I think it's such a great partnership, though, because one, it really brings everything to life. But two, it allows schools to know what the community needs, and it allows the community to understand what the schools are doing, to work together in that aspect. But apart from all of that, just for any student, but specifically a language learner, that creates opportunity for a lot of language use through listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And then therefore allows for those opportunities in the moment, in real life, to make those cross-linguistic connections sometimes.
Yeah,
I think just all of this is so important, just coming to life. I remember one time I was talking with a principal, and she said, it's kind of like back to the snow scenario, watching a video or seeing something about the ocean is just as good as going to the ocean. And I said, unless you've been to the ocean, I guess, because whenever and like, no, the video is not going to cut it. Like, the experience being at the ocean is vastly different from just watching it.
For sure.
Especially como en el paraíso de Costa Rica. I mean, it's just so beautiful over there for sure. So if you are wanting to go on a field trip, I do recommend Costa Rica for sure.
It's a great place for a field trip.
Yeah, set up some study abroad programs. Yeah. I actually have set up a study abroad program as well at the University of Connecticut, but for university students, for pre-service teachers to go back to the school where we taught and to do their own study abroad kind of program there. So it works for the older students as well.
Yeah. Well, I really feel passionately that, and it's not necessarily 100% doable, but I just recommend everyone to go travel. But I just feel like whenever you go through a college or a university, it would be very nice if people could go travel somewhere to study. It doesn't necessarily have to be language, but just to break your own barrier of where you are, currently, wherever that may be, but to cross the border to go somewhere, and not at the all-inclusive resort. Not as a tourist to escape. But more as a traveler to experience,
For sure. There's
and
a big
to really
difference.
get to be there. There is a big difference for sure. One question I want to know. So I it's always been this dream of mine one day to open up a dual language education school also. And so whenever I was reading about yours, I was really enticed. And so a friend of mine said, you need to write it down for it to happen. So I wrote it down on a Post-it note, and I've had it, and I always think about it. And I've often jokingly said, because I loved Costa Rica so much, went and then didn't come back and ended up coming back later, that I was going to do it in Costa Rica. And then so all of a sudden, here this out of the box school pops up, and I'm like, this is real. It's really incredible. And so I want to say felicidades again. It's wonderful that you have been able to experience this and to live this in its fullest. And I am tengo ceros, pero ceros de bueno.
Yeah, you have to go visit.
Good jealousy. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Hey, I'll see you soon. You don't have to tempt me twice. I will definitely come.
Our doors are always open.
It would be fantastic. But I always thought it would be really, really great to not just be able to go and, either as a professor, as a presenter, as a collaborator, to discuss these great things that we see that you have in the book right here, but to also be able to say, if you wanted to see it in live and living color, come here and look at it. This is what it looks like. Can you tell us about the great things that are in this book? Because sometimes people think it sounds great in theory, but in application, it doesn't always work. Now, I know better. I know that you two know better. I've been fortunate to experience that it works. But for anyone out there that just says, hey, I am going to read this book, and I do want to do comprehensible input and output, and I want all the roots, and I want to do cultural and whatever, but how do I do? Can you tell us how this really works for real?
Yeah, it works for real. It's not easy, but it does work for real. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful to my staff as we've developed our curriculum and our program is to focus on these common roots in soil. Keep it simple, understand the why behind the how. Our book gives a lot of those examples. I tried to take pictures. I'm not great at it, actually. Liz and I are trying to do better at trying to remember, to take pictures and to remember these great things that are happening. But really for us, what it boils down to is trying to make sure that all of our lessons, activities, and units are exactly what we were just talking about, completely about the experience, hands-on, interdisciplinary units. For us, that's really important, that the kids' experience is the way that they're learning. So we do take lots of field trips. We build our units, and all of our reading and all of our literacy components come from the science and social studies concepts. So we make sure that if we're teaching about, we just did a unit on the universe and Earth and space, that we were making sure we're taking pictures of the moon every night and then bringing them the next day and making charts and putting them on the wall, and that everything is relative and meaningful, that the kids believe in what they're doing as having super value, right? Mm-hmm. So for us, it's about community connections, like we were just talking about, that all of our projects have an end goal, that we're going to be either presenting to the school community, to the greater community with our families, or the larger community of Brasilito. So that's an important feature. We try to make sure that everything, again, has that connection with the literacy that we're reading. So we have songs and poems I sing all the time. My kids joke, it's like, why are you singing that? I'm like, because you'll remember it better. Yes, if there's a song to it, then you're going to remember it. And I still have kids, my fifth graders will sing, the color songs because they remembered me singing them to them all those years ago. So I think just kind of weaving all of these common roots and soil into our daily practices. We created a checklist. So when we build our units, we have it's actually in the book where you can say does this lesson have comprehensible input or output? Does it have building background? Are we meeting all of these? And if not, what can we add? And then we reflect on it. So my team reflects all the time on how units went, how lessons went, and to make sure, I feel like we need to add more. So next year it just gets better, because it never really stops. Mm-hmm. It's not like we can just say one and done, this unit's amazing. It's your dynamics in your classroom are going to change, or demographics are going to change from year to year, and you can just always keep evolving. And I think that's a key part of it too, is just to recognize we're never really finished. Yeah. Even though we've got something built and that's great, we can always reflect and do better and serve our students better, because from year to year they're going to have different backgrounds and experiences and levels of language and levels of where they are in the academics. So for us, that's important. And also differentiation is just a key component too, not just for language, but for academics as well. So we try to make sure that we're just through the hands-on things, it makes it much easier, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're doing centers and games and lots of different things, you can vary it much easier. I don't know. That's a lot. I don't know if I'm even really answering your question.
It's perfect. It's perfect. And what's really great is that you also have a little note for administrators all the time. And I really appreciate those notes to administrators, because sometimes this is not all the time, but sometimes the leaders don't understand the dual language program, but the teachers do. And the leader was put there for another reason. So I think it's fantastic that there were some notes saying, hey, and then there's also the gentle reminder to teachers, speaking of differentiation, listen to me, differentiation, that start where you are. Mm-hmm. Don't try to jump into the deep end yet. Just start where you are. And all this takes time. So I feel like we need grace and compassion for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to have grace and compassion for our leaders with, some reminders and those open communication, but also whether you be a veteran teacher or you might be a brand new emergency certified adjunct teacher put in this classroom right now, simply because you are bilingual.
Yeah, that was
right.
Which doesn't mean that you know everything about the pedagogy, but they say, that was me.
That was me too.
I had no background. They're like, oh, you speak Spanish, you're bilingual, go in here. And I didn't even know what bilingual teacher meant until I thought, oh, it's newcomer teacher, and it's not just Spanish, and. So anyway, to the point, it's really fantastic to be able to have, the permission from you all in this book to say start wherever you need to start, but also the reminders for administrators.
I think also, teachers need a little bit of credit because they're doing great work already.
Yes, thank you.
And this is not to say
to our teachers.
Exactly. They're already doing great things. Like Liz said, I was already just by nature doing some best practices without really knowing that was dual language best practices. But I think that's, you take a self-check and say, where are my strengths and what can I improve on? And then that's the one you focus on. We don't want everybody to feel like they have to, take all of this at one time. You can say, I'm really great at comprehensible output. How can I improve on building background knowledge? And let that be my focus until it becomes second nature, right? Yes. And then it's just how you do. And that's kind of how we tell people all the time is do a little evaluation on yourself, do a little self-check, see what you're really great at, and then focus on one and just do that until you could do it with your eyes closed. And then you move on to a different one.
Right.
That is key. I did not know either. I'm so sorry. I didn't know either I was doing project-based learning. I just knew I did show business, right? So I just knew there was no business like show business. business. So make it engaging and project-based. And I was like,
Exactly.
oh, that's project-based learning. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's
you were
you know,
saying?
for many people, it really is just giving labels to what they already do. You know, for some people, it's
Exactly.
brand new information, and it really is new practice. But for many people, it's just giving labels and categories to things that they do to create some intentionality around it, and to create some shared vocabulary, some shared language, and shared practices about it. And building on that too, you know, another feature of this tool that we have in the book, and we also have online companion documents that we're just about to release this week. We've been working really hard on
when the podcast comes out.
Yeah, exactly. For sure, they should be right on our.
We speak it into
on our tandemteachers.com website.
Put it out there.
They'll there's one for administrators. There's a companion document specifically for administrators, and then one for teachers. So it's designed to kind of facilitate book study, or just using the book and breaking things down a little bit more. And the tool that Shera is talking about is in there. We have that, the co-planning tool. And part of what's important about that is, like Shera was saying, kind of going through and what you were asking about before, like, how do I actually do this? How, okay, it worked for you, but how does it work for me? So that's what we suggest, is that you might pick one to start with, especially if this is new for you. We don't want you to get overwhelmed, and just start by looking at the curriculum that you're already using, and just go do kind of an audit of it, do a review of not the whole curriculum, just tomorrow's lesson, or what an upcoming lesson for next week, and just ask yourself, okay, if we're going to focus on comprehensible output, because that's often one that we work with on schools, because that's oftentimes comprehensible input they're stronger on. They know to use visuals and multimedia and to speak more slowly, but they don't necessarily give kids opportunities to speak themselves or write themselves. Often the scripted curricula don't prompt them to do it. They often prompt them to do whole group instruction without a lot of opportunities for, where only one child responds. And so, kind of thinking about, okay, how can we take this? But so that's exactly what you might do. You might, okay, so we're going to focus on comprehensible output, and let's look at where this lesson already has it. Oh, okay, well, I see that there's a turn and talk. There's a prompt for a turn and talk. Okay, that's good. But that's actually it. Okay, so let's give them a prompt for the turn and talk. Let's give them some sentence frames to use. So we're going to scaffold their comprehensible output. And let's also add in a small group. Like, instead of doing this practice in the whole group, let's go and do it in small groups, or make it a center. Let's make it a center where the kids can talk. So just like so that's what we kind of think about, like what's already there, and then how can we tweak it just to really enhance that aspect. But the really important part also in a dual language context is, how do we do that together if we're two different teachers? If I'm the English teacher, so Shera and I was the Spanish teacher, she was the English teacher. So in different models work differently, but let's say you're in a model where you both teach math, but you've got two different groups of kids. So I'm doing Unit 1, Lesson 1 in Spanish with Group A, and Shera at the exact same time is doing Unit 1, Lesson 1 in English with Group B. So all the kids are getting Unit 1, Lesson 1, half in English, half in Spanish. Well, if we don't plan together, I might use a lot of these common roots in soil because I was trained in them and I know about them, or I just think they're important. And Shera, in the meantime, maybe wasn't trained in them, or, whatever. And so she doesn't do any of them. And so the kids are getting really unequal experiences. And it's making it much harder than when they switch, right? Because they're going to go back and forth every day or every week. So suddenly when Shera's kids come to me, I think that they've done these activities. I think they've done the centers or the small group for comprehensible output. I think they've had these multimedia or anchor charts for comprehensible input, and then they haven't. And so I can't build on that the way I thought I was going to be able to build on it. And so that's why it's really important not just to do it yourself, but to do it with your partner if you're in a two-teacher model. And that's where the tandem teaching comes in. That's what we mean by tandem teaching. We mean in dual language programs when we have two different teachers, an English teacher and a partner language teacher, who really need to work together as two parts of one system. We're not two separate teachers in a parallel monolingual model. We're really two parts of one system, and we have to coordinate together. And that means making sure that if we use the common roots in soil, that we're doing it consistently in both classrooms. And so that also might mean, like, maybe I'm really comfortable with the common roots and soil. Maybe my partner is new. So we might just slow down a little bit and we might say, okay, we're going to focus on this one that my partner's ready to focus on because we want to be consistent. And so we're going to just kind of focus there and we're going to go at that pace. And I just might naturally add in a few other things that I kind of can't help, I just do them automatically, like Shera was saying. It's not like I have to tie my hands behind my back and never do them. But in terms of a planning and like agreement, we will at least agree to do whichever ones we're working on together as a team, because we are two parts of one whole. We're two parts of one system.
Right.
And it's so important to really be disciplined in having that planning time really carved out.
That's why we talk to the administrators, right? Because
Yes.
we are saying like, hey, they need this time. This is not easy work. They need the time to plan. It needs to be done in a way that, you make the charts, like we know what your visuals are going to look like. All these things take time. And so we do these like knock, 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 administrator, they need extra time to do this. So we're hoping that message comes across because it's not easy work. And so we point out key places where we think that it's important for them to pay attention.
Yes.
So that this can actually happen in practice.
And I love how the point was made earlier that a lot of educators are already doing this work and they don't necessarily know it. And so I really appreciate like us highlighting that it's the intentionality that we're focused on. It's putting a name to it so we can have a common vocabulary of what we're doing. But of course, early childhood education really lends itself to forms of language acquisition already in many ways, versus what you might see in secondary. But I always remind the teachers whenever I'm able to do fun work with them that you already are doing this. We're just going to, like I said, be more intentional, give it a name, and then we're going to make some connections, with different levels of language proficiency and how do we actually implement this now, et cetera. And a lot of teachers are always surprised that they don't need to be bilingual to do this. Many teachers are surprised that they don't have to be bilingual to incorporate or implement translanguaging circles, for example, in their classroom. And I've been fortunate to work with one teacher who was monolingual only in English and decided that she wanted to really try this translanguaging thing a little bit. So we just, little by little, and the kids really took it over. And then you had the English.
Absolutely.
This is a fourth grade class, and the English only speakers in this fourth grade class were learning Spanish, which wasn't hurting anybody. I told them, I said, listen, it hasn't hurt me being bilingual. Like you can still learn and grow. But then the other students, because English was not their primary language, they were learning English and acquiring it so much faster because of what was happening, because they themselves were making the cross-linguistic connections. It didn't even look like the formal puente that we might be looking at, but just because kind of those scenarios where I didn't know I was doing project-based learning, you didn't know what you were, but it happened to be happening organically. But now we put a name to it. And the success that came from that was just really, really incredible, not just for the students, but the teacher. Wanting to retire. Sure. She wanted to retire, and then she decided, I don't want to retire. This is really fun. I want to keep doing this. It's so fulfilling.
Yeah.
Right. That's incredible. And then she was asking, can I have more newcomer students in my class?
Wow,
which
awesome.
A lot of times the conversation was flipped, like, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. And so I think that whenever we do have these conversations, we can start to be very intentional and we can name it, we can bring it together. Having that opportunity to empower a professional educator in a classroom working and serving these students right here, I think is one of the game changers that we don't recognize as such a powerful moment that literally a teacher who was able to retire wanted to decided, let me keep doing this.
Right.
That was exciting.
Right. Yeah, and that word empower is
like,
it's exactly what we were thinking. That's really what we hope our book and our work does. We have these 6 big ideas of tandem teaching, and a lot of them have to do with teacher agency, and that we say this teacher agency is both required and promoted through tandem teaching. You need to know this information, you need to understand the research and best practices behind it, and then you should have the professional autonomy to be able to make the choices that are in the best interest of your students. And teacher satisfaction is one of the outcomes that we think should be considered too. That it's not just about, of course, it's largely about student outcomes and about instructional quality, but we think teacher outcomes should be factored in too. That teacher satisfaction is an important outcome, and thinking about the climate for teachers and what their experiences are. Is really important in its own right and as a mechanism for helping to promote stronger student outcomes.
Well, and then there's a direct correlation between collective teacher efficacy that we know from John Hattie's research and how that therefore factors into the efficacy that students feel in the classroom as well. There are implications to this on both sides. And
It's a
whenever
system.
the teacher has that collective efficacy right, and then the students have it, well, that's going to help, therefore, lower my affective filter. I feel a little bit more engaged, a little bit more motivated. And then while the teacher is implementing these pedagogical practices at the same time, I'm set up for success. I don't have to lose any part of my identity or who I am. I get to keep my language, keep my culture, keep my heritage, and add to it and not take away. I think it's so exciting.
Right. And I think your earlier point about how English monolingual teachers can do these strategies, it's absolutely right. And that's a big message that we have in the book. And in chapter 3, where we introduce the idea of translanguaging and talk about that and navigating that tension between translanguaging and separation of languages, we talk a lot about how really in dual language programs, especially, the English teacher does need to step up and do more of the translanguaging work, because it often seems to, by default, fall to the partner language teacher, because they're the person who's bilingual and who may do it more naturally. But that's where the planning together, the intentionality, and the thought about how can we have this be a role that we both share and that the English teacher takes on is really, really important.
And it can be super simple. We talk about a linking moment is what we call it, when you have these planned activities that, if you're doing a unit and you have vocabulary that you're going to be, switching day by day and introducing vocabulary, it would be just like what you do in a monolingual classroom, right? You're like, yesterday we did this, today we're going to do this. So you can say, yesterday in Spanish, you did this, tell me this word, and they will. You don't have to know. I mean, of course you do know because you planned, but you don't have to know how to pronounce it, for example. When I first started teaching, I wasn't as proficient in Spanish as I am now. So I'm certain that I, mispronounced words. And as you can hear with my Southern accent, I'm sure it was, completely butchered. But I think it's important that, you kind of put yourself out there and show your students as a language learner, and you can say, tell me. So we would do that. We would say, like, tell me yesterday, what did you learn? And you even have it on the chart. That's the other thing that we also suggest is let the charts travel with the kids, because it doesn't need to stay in your room. It should be, what the kids are working on. It's a living and breathing chart, just like you. So I think it's really simple to take those little moments, linking moments, and say, tell me what you did yesterday. Oh, you learned about, whatever, shapes, and it's circles. You learned circle. Tell me circle. What is this word? And they say circle. And you're like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's look at your chart. Today we're going to do a new one. And then it goes back and forth. And it's that simple, but those moments are really important to help your kids make those connections.
1,000%. And that was one of the big takeaways, not that it's anything that's brand new or a big shock to anybody, but in the research that I was doing, one of the big key takeaways was whenever the teacher would learn a language alongside with the students. So I think it's even whenever the students know that you're bilingual, it's wonderful. But whenever they know that you're monolingual and you're trying that hard, I think it just touches your heart in a different way, and the kids see it. But I think what's really impactful, though, is that the teacher gets to experience something that they hadn't experienced yet, which automatically better informs their pedagogical practice and what they actually do in the classroom, because now they have empathy with what their students were also going through, perhaps.
And it makes your students a little more comfortable too, right? Like that they know their teacher's learning too. That makes them a little bit less hesitant to practice speaking or, to openly share in class when everybody's kind of learning along together. That just opens that up a little bit for your kids.
1,000%. And I really promote this, kind of for everybody. I'll be working with schools, and we'll do a comparison, for example, where they might students might have to go over to one side of the room to work on some program and and practice skills up to a certain grade level. But then whenever we start looking comparatively at the state scores, for example, on their state assessment, both students might have below basic scores. But the student that happened to be put over on the side and doesn't necessarily have the proficiency in English, yet actually knew the content at a higher level than the English only student over here, getting to participate fully in class all the time, but still performing at the other level. And so instead of this being like that bubble at the bottom, or maybe just for dual language or so, which of course again that's the oxygen. I mean, these are non-negotiables that have to happen. I mean, just imagine though if that would be kind of like that top bubble, kind of that first lens that we go through, because we're all acquiring language. And there's different dialects and different vocabulary in different parts of just the United States. And we know that that's so true whenever we consider how to say straw in Spanish, right? Just because it's Spanish, because it's English, doesn't mean it's all the same word. You got, popote, sorbete, sorbeto,
vajilla,
bombilla. I mean, you got like all these different words for it. But I think that's where it becomes really interesting is how can we take these practices and this pedagogy and make it where it's not just specifically for the multilingual student, but it allows us to really understand the Latin roots of words, the Anglo-Saxon German almost that we speak today, but making these connections even in science classes and different Romance languages. And so it doesn't have to just be in this dual language education program in that one elementary school in that district, even though the other elementary school is right next to it that still has half of them as bilingual students. This is something that can really be an incredible, mindset shift and change in our practices that helps elevate the voice and the choice and the traditions and the identities of all of our students and really celebrate multiculturalism and diversity.
Yeah.
I get so excited. Listen, I could be with you all day. I know that you have busy scheduled things to do, but as we wrap up right here, is there just anything that you would like to share with our listeners? Celebrations, the next upcoming things, anything exciting, or just some not final thoughts because they're so final, but some lasting comments maybe.
Well, one really exciting thing we have coming up that's kind of connected to everything we've been talking about today is we're going to be hosting a webinar through Dual Language Schools just to kind of go over our common roots in soil for those that are interested in learning a little bit more. And then we're going to be having a course launching in September. We're going to do it in English and in Spanish.
Two different sections, an English section and a
two different
Spanish
sections.
section,
Yep. Exactly. So it'll be 9-week course in the evenings.
Okay.
For any people interested, you can register for that on our website, tandemteachers.com. So we're excited about that because it'll be our first time teaching in Spanish, and we think it's really great opportunity because a lot of PD is always in English, and it's just kind of fun to give it a shot in Spanish and welcome Spanish speakers to our course. And so we're excited about that.
We did teach it last.
That could be a whole other podcast episode doing PD and Espanol.
Yeah. We did kind of a bilingual attempt last winter and really enjoyed it. But we thought we might try it with separate English. I mean, of course, people can be bilingual in either space, but having a predominant presentation in English or Spanish, we're going to give that a go this time.
I'm so excited, and they can find that. Is that on your tandemteachers.com?
That's
website?
right. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, listeners, just so you know, I will make sure that Mike and I will make sure that we have this information in, and as well as the official bios for our amazing guests today in the description of this podcast episode today. And so we will make sure to have, like I said, the bios as well as the out of the box learning lab, the otblearninglab.com, tandemteachers.com, and also via Dual Language Education New Mexico, DLENM.org. There is an article that I encourage all of you to read that I did read as well, and I wanted to get deeper into some translanguaging stuff because I have lots of questions I would love to ask. So I think we should maybe really plan a part 2 if you all would be interested.
Yeah, that would be great.
For sure, and continue this conversation. But the article is called "Navigating Tensions Between Translanguaging and Separation of Languages in Dual Language Programs."
Right. And that's
we will have all these links in there for you.
And that monograph is really an excerpt from chapter 3 of the book, and it's really kind of the engine of the book. So it definitely gives teach readers kind of a taste of what the book is about, and the cross-linguistic pedagogies that we introduce that really are the heart of the book. And we are also going to be presenting for anyone who's on the conference circuit and planning on traveling around in the fall. In Utah, we're going to do a half-day pre-conference institute at the Immersion conference in early October on this navigating tensions between translanguaging and separation of languages, and then another session on it during the conference. And we'll also be at La Cosecha presenting there. So we'd love to meet anybody in person. If you're going to be going to either of those conferences, please come and say hi to us.
Wonderful. Well, I will be at La Cosecha. Okay. Así que espero que nos encontremos. Okay? For sure. Definitely.
Yeah, nos ponemos de acuerdo. Yeah. We'll be the ones on the tandem bike.
I'm so excited.
Last year we had a tandem bike there.
Yes.
So we'll see if we get one this year too.
That is so exciting. I was there too. I don't know how I missed you on the
last
tandem
year.
bike.
You were there. Yeah, we had a tandem bike right in
Albuquerque presenting. Yes. Oh my God.
We were downstairs.
We were right by the men's room.
I'm not going to lose you this next time. Okay. We will. I'm going to find you for sure. Also, for all of our Instagram and Facebook users, we will have a link there for their tandem teachers on Instagram as well as Facebook. And to both of you, I just want to say thank you again for not only taking time out of your day to share this amazing information and your research on our podcast, but thank you from a personal standpoint, just because it is researchers and practitioners like you that have helped people like me grow in this field. And I lean on your research. I continue to learn from that. And I just thank you so much for the groundwork that you've laid out so people like me can continue in this work as well. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank
It
you
was
for
wonderful
having us.
to
This has
meet
been
you
a lot of
and
fun.
talk with you. Yeah.
Well, we're going to plan a part 2. So listeners, stay tuned. And I really will. We're going to continue this conversation for sure. So much more to talk about. As we wrap up, just thank you again to Shera Simpson for being here today. Pura vida, que viva Costa Rica, me encanta. And Dr. Elizabeth Howard, thank you so much for being here. And on behalf of EduSkills, we thank you so much. Our sponsor, Mike Overhaul, our producer. And as always, everyone, I wish you all the best. Wish you all the love in the world. Gracias por todo. And adios.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Adios!